At the crossroads of history, mysticism, and science, a shadowy figure emerges from the past. Bene, the warrior. A name whispered through the centuries, yet shrouded in mystery. Was he a key player in the fateful Battle of Brenta, where the Hungarian warriors triumphed against overwhelming odds? Or did he practice the ancient, enigmatic art of trephination, leaving behind a mark on his skull that still sparks curiosity today? With each discovery, his burial finds and genetic insights weave a tale of distant origins, linking him to a world that stretches beyond time. But who was he, really? Could he have been Örs Elbow, the legendary chieftain whose name pulses through the veins of Hungarian lore? Join me on a journey as we delve deep into the life of this 10th-century Hungarian conqueror, unearthed in 1834 from the grave of Bene. Through the lens of the original reconstructions, my AI-powered illustrations and detailed genetic analysis will uncover the untold layers of his story, one that bridges history, myth, and the secrets of the past. This is Bene, like you've never seen him before. Let's dive into the legend. Alright, let's break this down step by step. This isn't just about genetics, it's about peeling back the layers of what makes Bene such a compelling figure. And trust me, we're just getting started. First, let's address the recent updates. A DNA XP now lists Bene as having brown eyes and either brown or red hair. Interestingly, recent adjustments seem to lean more toward brown hair, which marks a shift from earlier depictions, where red hair was a defining feature. To keep things clear, I've recreated his appearance with dark hair to reflect the update, while keeping a reference to the older data. Previous data, August 9, 2024, red hair, widely recognized in previous portrayals. Current data, December 27, 2024, brown hair, offering a slightly different interpretation. It's not just about aesthetics. Changing data raises serious questions about consistency and integrity. Alternations like these risk distorting established narratives and reshaping perceptions in ways that may stray from the original context. This is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore about Bene. Stick around, because it's about to get even more intriguing. Wait a second, I've been calling him Bene, but was that really his original name? Let's travel back in time to clear this up, all the way to the 1830s. In 1834, something extraordinary happened. The grave of Bene was discovered. And not just any grave. This was the very first burial from the Hungarian conquest era ever unearthed. Yes, you heard that right. Bene was the very first early Hungarian warrior ever found. The story begins with 3 shepherds in the Bene area. They stumbled upon the grave and its remarkable artifacts, including the skull of the deceased. These findings were handed over to Szent Király Moritz, a scholar from Pest County. Later, Yankovic Miklos, a nobleman and art collector, published the discovery, marking the first ever scientific documentation of a conquest-era Hungarian burial. The discovery sparked a wave of interest in early Hungarian material culture, later popularized through a publication by Szerelmi Miklos. These 3 figures, Szent Király Yankovic and Szerelmi, became the heralds of Bene, champions of history with their intellect and grace. In the splendor of 19th-century Hungary, they were more than scholars. They were symbols of dedication to uncovering the mysteries of the past. But here's the twist. Why call him Bene? That name is tied to the burial site Bene, but his true identity might be more complex. One artifact from his grave, a decorative strap end, hints at an entirely different name. Scholars like Harmata János propose that the inscriptions on it could be bilingual. An old Turkic phrase, reading the belt of Lord Örs, and a Hungarian, runic inscription, translating to Örs Elbow, or Örs tribal chief. This opens the fascinating possibility that the man buried at Bene was actually named Örs, a leader of considerable importance, whose legacy intertwined with the land of his burial. So, was his name really Bene, or was it Örs? Either way, his story remains as captivating as ever, and we're just scratching the surface. Let's dive into the genetic origins of Bene step by step. Genetic distances and origins. Using his G25 coordinates from Davidsky's Vaha duo averages, we can trace his ancestry across key time periods. Bronze Age, early roots, shaping his genetic profile. Iron Age, key influences from Eurasian steppe cultures. Medieval period, reflecting the unique admixture of the conquering Hungarians. Haplogroups, providing further insights into paternal lineage. Closest modern populations. While genetic distance doesn't reveal direct ancestry, it highlights populations with similar admixture ratios. Bene's closest matches include the Bashkirs, various Tatar groups, the Conti people, and the Kets. Closest ancient populations. His genetic ties are closest to the Kushnarenko-Vokaraya culture, the Western Siberian Scytho-Siberian Sargat culture, and other Scytho-Siberian Sarka groups. These connections offer a fascinating glimpse into ancient Eurasian steppe dynamics. Early ancestry, Neolithic foundations. Before we delve into the Iron Age and medieval connections, let's start with Bene's Neolithic roots. Using Vahaduo and Davidsky's G25 averages, we can pinpoint his ancestry's links to early Neolithic populations, represented visually in a detailed donut chart. Iron Age and medieval insights. According to the 2022 publication, The Genetic Origin of Huns, Avars, and Conquering Hungarians, Bene falls into the Conq_Asia_Core 1 genetic cluster of the conquering Magyars. This cluster is broken down as 50% Mansalike ancestry, 35% Sarmatian ancestry, 15% Zhongnu ancestry. These proportions reveal a dynamic mix of Eurasian steppe and Siberian influences, painting a vivid picture of his origins. Let's dig deeper into these fascinating layers of history. As we approach the conquest era, let's dive into the early medieval ancestry of Bene. His genetic roots take us back to the Kushnarenko-Vokaraya culture, located in the Ural-Siberian region. This area, dating to the early 9th century AD, is often considered a key ancestral homeland of the Hungarians. Using my G25 model, which includes medieval genetic coordinates, the results show that the majority of Bene's ancestry comes from this culture. The rest, it's a mix of medieval Turkic populations, minor Mongolic influences, and nomads from the Kongai Mountains, who share traits with modern East Iranic peoples. My pie chart of his genetic admixtures reveals that most of his genome aligns with the Uralic Kushnarenko-Vok culture. So, what is this Kushnarenko-Vokaryakopovo culture? It's an archaeological site in the southern Ural region, and home to the ULG cemetery, which shows the greatest genetic similarity to the conquering Hungarians, including Bene, who scored roughly 72% in my model. It's important to note that Bene was likely born in Itelkos, and already lived in Central Europe by the early 10th century. So, this analysis doesn't reflect his direct ancestral origins, but rather the genetic similarities based on medieval populations from his time. And here's where things get even more exciting. There's a striking resemblance between archaeological finds from the Hungarian conquest period in the Carpathian Basin and items discovered in Ulgi and Siniglazovo cemeteries in the Transural region. These connections bridge the material and genetic heritage of Bene, painting a vivid picture of his ancestral story. Let's keep unraveling these fascinating links. Before I forget, let's dive into Bene's haplogroups, based on a couple of sources. His paternal haplogroup is CF1756, which traces back to East Asia. There are two possible variations of this haplogroup: C2A, 1A, 1B, 1B, typically found in regions like Mongolia and Central Asia. According to OpenStreetMap, C2A, 1A, 1B, 1A2B, which appears in data from sources like a DNAXP, and is more associated with Siberia. Above, you can see a heat map from ESEC DNA, showing the relative frequency of his paternal haplogroup, CF1756, across various regions. The heat map gives you a visual idea of where his haplogroup is most common, particularly in areas like Siberia, Mongolia, and parts of Central Asia. To make things even clearer, here's a branching diagram that shows how his paternal lineage might look. It helps break down the variations in his haplogroup and offers a better overview of his paternal ancestry. Moving on to his maternal roots, Bene's maternal haplogroup is U-CDR, which spans across both Central Asia and Europe. The U4D2 haplogroup, marked by specific SNP variations like T5567C, C10692T, and C11326T, emerged around 12,000 years ago, with a TMRCA, time to most recent common ancestor, of about 3,000 years ago. These SNP markers are found across various populations in Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Russia, including the Kets, and China, specifically Uyghurs. This highlights the diverse Eurasian connections and migration patterns of early human populations in these regions. Finally, we've got a heat map showing the relative frequency of the mtDNA haplogroup, U4D2, which is notably concentrated in Arctic Siberia. This distribution is likely a reflection of ancient migration patterns and the isolation of populations in that region. Over millennia, U4D2 has been preserved in higher frequencies among northern populations, making it an intriguing part of Bene's genetic heritage. As I mentioned earlier, the role of Bene in the Battle of Brenta is a fascinating topic. Could he have been one of the key leaders who helped secure the Hungarian victory at the Brenta River? And what do the Berenger coins found in his grave tell us about his legacy in those early Hungarian raids into Italy? The drawings of Yankovic of the 30 silver coins found with Bene's remains show that they all date back to the reign of King Berenger I, who ruled Italy until 920. Interestingly, these coins weren't used as currency, they had all been pierced. This suggests they were worn as adornments, likely on Bene's clothing. It's possible that, as a prominent leader of the Hungarian campaigns in Italy, Bene wore them as symbols of his status and achievements during the raid. Now, let's take a brief detour to art history. There's a famous fresco in the lower church of the Aquilare Basilica that depicts a Hungarian warrior, perhaps a representation of the battle itself, September 24, 899. When the Hungarians, outnumbered 3-1, defeated Berenger I's forces. This victory is considered one of the earliest and most important chapters of the Hungarian campaigns across Europe. After their victory, the Hungarians continued their campaigns, moving further into Europe. The map above shows just how far their reach extended in the years following their triumph at Brenta. Now, back to Bene. Here's a fascinating theory. Could he have been a warrior who, in his later years, fondly recounted tales of his youth in Italy to his grandchildren? Perhaps, when he passed away, his descendants buried him with the spoils of his war, his sword, arrows, and even a sacrificed horse. Along with these, his grave contained ornate belt buckles made from looted coins, including the Berenger coins. These coins, dating back to Berenger I's reign, may have been a mark of his leadership during the raids, though it's also possible that they were bestowed upon him by later Hungarian leaders as a token of respect for his earlier campaigns. According to Liudprand, the Lombard chronicler, later leaders played important roles in assisting Berenger I during the 921-922 campaign, suggesting that Bene's influence and legacy continued to resonate well after his time in Italy. In fact, the Berenger coins were also found in other warrior graves, in places like Karash and Kiskunfeledeza, including those of warriors who had clearly been part of the Hungarian military elite. These coins likely represent more than just spoils of war. They might be seen as a lasting tribute to Bene's courage, leadership, and his enduring importance in the collective memory of the early Hungarian campaigns. But before we wrap things up, let's share a few fascinating tidbits about Bene that you might find intriguing. First off, he was likely born in Elkos, the area to the north of the Black Sea, where the early Hungarians lived before the conquest, probably sometime between 830 and 895. Now here's something extra interesting. Bene had a mysterious scald mark on his skull. This wasn't just a random injury, it was likely caused by trephination, a practice performed by Magyar shamans. This elite warrior underwent the procedure, and even today, the Hungarian word, agafod, meaning carved in the brain, preserves the memory of this operation. Isn't that wild? Trephination was performed by shamans, and it's a hauntingly mystic practice. Here's a picture of a Conti shaman from the Upper Baika, from 1914. It gives a glimpse into the kind of spiritual world the Magyars may have inhabited. Well, that's all for now. I hope you've gotten to know this fierce early medieval Hungarian conqueror, Bene, and maybe even grown a bit fond of him. Too close, let's take another look at some more personal digital reconstructions of him, inspired by the contemporary Hungarian style. Can you imagine what it was like for him to live more than 1,000 years ago in Hungary, with genetics tracing back to the very first gene pool of the Hungarians? A quick note before I go. This post is not driven by any ulterior motive or agenda. It's simply my hobby. I love exploring DNA, art, archaeology, and new methods. Sometimes, minor misinterpretations may happen, and if so, I apologize in advance. Constructive criticism is always welcome, because we learn from our mistakes. Thank you all for reading, and I hope you enjoyed this journey.